My name is Caroline Parker. I'm 36 years old, and I've lived in this city for almost a decade now. My apartment isn't much to most people, just a two-bedroom on the fourth floor of a tired old brick building, but to me, it's everything. It's the result of years of overtime shifts, missed vacations, saying no when friends asked me out because I was saving for that down payment. When I first put the keys in my hand, I remember crying, not because it was luxurious, but because it was mine. My space. My independence. But if you ask my sister, Rachel, it was never mine to begin with. Rachel is 2 years younger than me, 34 now, and for as long as I can remember, she's been the type to walk into a room and rearrange it as if it already belonged to her. When we were kids, she'd borrow my clothes without asking, eat the last slice of pizza even when she knew I was saving it, and call it sharing. She always had this way of twisting words to make me look selfish if I ever protested. Caroline doesn't like to share, she'd say, and suddenly, I was the bad sister. Our parents laughed it off, chalking it up to sibling rivalry. But to me, it never felt small. It felt like a shadow that followed me through every stage of life, her taking, me losing. We drifted as adults, but we never fully escaped each other. Our parents passed a few years back, Dad first, then Mom, and with them gone, the thread between us became thinner, weaker, and yet somehow heavier. It was just us left, whether we liked it or not. I thought buying my apartment would be the start of real independence. I thought maybe, finally, I'd carve out a corner of the world where Rachel's reach couldn't find me. But I should have known better. It started small. Rachel came by one afternoon about a year after I moved in, carrying a bag of groceries and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thought I'd surprise you," she said, setting the bag on my counter like she owned the place. I told her I was busy, but she brushed me off, kicked off her shoes, and plopped onto my couch. "It's so cozy here," she mused. "Feels like home." I should have recognized it then, the way she said home, like it was hers too. Over time, her visits became less like visits and more like intrusions. She'd show up with laundry, claiming her machine broke. She'd bring overnight bags, saying she didn't want to drive back across town. Once, I came home from work and found her asleep in my bed, her shoes kicked off carelessly on the floor. I asked her what she was doing there and she just laughed. "What's yours is mine, right?" That phrase, that tone, it boiled my blood. But each time, I swallowed my anger, told myself it wasn't worth the fight. Because deep down, I still carried the stupid, stubborn hope that she'd change. That one day, she'd respect me. Then came the breaking point. It was a Saturday morning, gray and drizzly outside, when she knocked on my door with her arms full of boxes. "What's all this?" I asked, eyeing the cardboard stacked in her hands. She didn't answer. She just pushed past me, setting the boxes on my floor with a grunt. "Moving in," she said casually, brushing rain off her jacket. "Excuse me?" "You heard me." She didn't even look at me as she spoke. She was already scanning my living room, deciding where her things would go. "This is family property, Caroline. Mom and Dad would have wanted us both to have a place here. It's not fair for you to hog it." Family property. That was the exact phrase she used. And it made my stomach drop like a stone. I stood there, frozen, my mind racing. This wasn't just her being pushy, wasn't just her overstaying her welcome. This was her laying claim to the very thing I had bled for. Every late night, every dollar saved, every dream I'd invested into those walls, she wanted to rewrite it as if it was never mine. Something cracked inside me that day. For the first time, I didn't argue. I didn't try to reason with her or explain myself. I just nodded, lips pressed tight, and walked into my bedroom. I let her unpack. I let her settle onto the couch she called ours. And then, when she finally left that evening to grab the rest of her stuff, I did the one thing I should have done years ago. I called a locksmith. The man came the next morning, a gruff, no-nonsense guy with a tool belt and a cigarette dangling from his lips. "Bad roommate?" he asked as he drilled into the lock. "Something like that," I murmured. By the time Rachel returned, arms full of more boxes, she found herself standing in front of a door that no longer opened. Her keys scraped uselessly against the metal. She knocked. Hard, sharp, angry. Caroline, open up. What the hell did you do? I sat in the kitchen, sipping tea, heart pounding so hard it rattled my ribs. For once, the lock wasn't just a piece of metal. It was a line in the sand. A boundary. Her voice rose, shrill and furious. This isn't just yours. It's family property. You can't keep me out. But I didn't answer. I just waited. I didn't answer because I knew what would happen if I did. We would have the same fight we've had since childhood. Me explaining, her twisting, me apologizing for not being generous enough with my own life. So, I let the pounding continue until the wood hummed with it. It's strange, the things you hear when you refuse to speak. The dull echo of your heartbeat, the hiss of your breath, the way an angry voice starts loud and then flickers, trying out different tactics like hands groping in the dark for a switch. Rachel tried rage first. Open the door, Caroline. Then indignation. How dare you? Then injury. You're really going to do this to your sister? And finally that cool, manipulative logic she's honed to a needle. This is family property. You can't legally lock me out. I was at the kitchen table with my tea when my phone lit up. A text. Then 10. Then 50. The group chat she'd resurrected after Mom died. Parker Girls. A title that always made me feel 12 and trapped in a shared bedroom, bloomed with cousins I barely spoke to, and an aunt who never missed a chance to stir. Rachel typed, "Can everyone please tell Caroline that she can't illegally evict her own family? This apartment belongs to both of us. Mom and Dad would be ashamed." I put the phone face down and watched the steam unspool from my mug. I could feel a bruise forming in my chest where guilt kept pressing. It's a familiar bruise, one I've nursed for decades. Be the bigger person, Caroline. Give her a little. Share. I stood and crossed to the door and looked through the peephole. Rain needled the hallway light. Rachel's hair was plastered to her jaw and her mascara had bled into the soft skin under her eyes. She looked like a girl, a dangerous illusion, one that always softened me. Behind her, a brown box drooped at the corners, its packing tape sagging like a frown. She must have heard the floorboard creak under my weight, because her head snapped up to the peephole like she could see me through it. "I know you're there," she said, lower now, coaxing. "Caroline, come on. Stop being dramatic. Let me in so we can talk." Talk meant she would talk, and I would be managed. I rested my forehead against the cool metal of the door. I remembered being 9 and clutching a brand new set of colored pencils I had bought with allowance and Rachel's little hand snake quick, taking the brightest ones because sharing, in our house, always meant surrender for me. I remember Dad's tired smile. "You're the big sister," and Mom's soothing, "It's just pencils." It was never just pencils. My phone rang. Then it rang again, a different tone. Aunt Linda's ringtone, the one I'd never bothered to change. I let it buzz out. I could predict her entire script. "Honey, your parents didn't raise you to be cruel." Rachel's had a hard time lately. Hard time meant she'd bounced a check or quit a job she never liked, which meant I was expected to bridge the gap between the person she wanted to be and the life she refused to build. The banging stopped. I watched her turn and pace, the soles of her wet flats squeaking across the hall. For a breath, the building sank into a hush broken only by somebody's TV and a dog shaking itself 2 floors down. Then Rachel's voice again, sharp as a thrown plate. "Fine. I'm calling the police." I blinked. My hand floated toward the deadbolt as if to spin it back, to end this, but I kept it where it was. I was done ending things by erasing myself. If she wanted strangers to witness our old play, I would let them. They came with the weary patience of people who've seen every variation of family drama. 2 officers, a man with kind eyes and a woman with a clipboard, walked down the hall with Rachel trailing between them like a plaintiff wheeling her case into court. I could hear her talking fast and clean. "I've been living here. She locked me out. This is family property. She can't do that to me." A knuckle rapped, this time polite. "Miss Parker? This is the police." The male officer's voice had that neutral music that makes you want to please it. "Could you open up so we can make sure everyone's okay?" I turned the deadbolt, then the chain, then opened just enough to show my face and the deed I'd been holding in both hands for 10 minutes like a talisman. "I'm fine," I said. "This is my apartment." I passed the paper through the crack. "I live here alone." He held it and scanned. The female officer glanced at Rachel. "Do you have a lease? Any mail with this address? ID that lists this place as your residence?" Rachel's laugh came out wrong. Too bright. "She knows I don't. She changed the locks while I was moving in." The officer nodded like he'd heard that exact sentence last week. "But have you been living here? Do you have proof of that?" "I was starting to," Rachel said, and every vowel punched the air like a threat. "This is family property. There's an understanding." The clipboard officer's eyebrows barely moved. "An understanding isn't legal ownership." She turned back to me. "Ma'am, we just need to confirm this is your residence." I held out my driver's license, my condo association card, the email I'd printed from the board last month about the new recycling schedule. He skimmed them and handed them back. "Okay. From what we can see, this is a civil matter. We can't force you to let anyone else in." His eyes softened, maybe because my hands were shaking. "If you feel threatened, you can file a report. If anyone attempts to break in, call us." Rachel's mouth fell open. "So, she gets away with it?" She turned to the officer as if to appeal to a higher court in his face. "She's always done this to me." I swallowed. "Always done this." The words scraped along my ribs like a rusty key. "Ma'am," the clipboard officer said to Rachel, gentler this time, "if you believe you have a legal claim to the property, you can pursue it through the courts. But right now we can't make her grant you access." They left her there in the hall with the drooping box and eyes that had gone glassy with disbelief. I closed the door quietly, letting the latch catch with a soft click that sounded like the end of something. After, I stood in the middle of my living room and listened to the quiet. For the first time in years, there was no immediate apology blooming on my tongue, no rush to smooth the ripples I hadn't made. My body felt electric and hollow at once. I went to the sink and ran water over my wrists, the pulse there tapping back. When the muscles in my shoulders finally unclenched enough to let me breathe, I called Leah. She's my oldest friend in the city, the one person who sat with me in the hospice waiting room when Mom was dying and brought me coffee with a lid that didn't leak. She picked up on the second ring. "How'd it go?" she asked, no hello necessary. She called the police. They told her it's a civil thing. They couldn't do anything. Leah exhaled a breath that sounded like a laugh dragged across gravel. "I wish I could say I'm surprised." I told her the rest because I could finally say it without choking, how it began with her creeping visits and how each time I tried to draw a boundary it got sanded down by guilt and pity until it looked friendly enough to cross. How today, when I didn't answer, I felt my childhood rearrange itself inside me, the way you move furniture to finally see the shape of a room. "So what now?" she asked. "Now I wait," I said, and I heard in my voice something steelier than I expected. "I document. I talk to the board. I talk to a lawyer. I stop arguing with feelings and start moving with facts." Leah's hum was approval and worry braided together. "I know someone you can call. He helped me when my landlord tried to pretend my lease didn't exist. His name's Keller. I'll text you his number. And Caroline, don't open that door again. Not unless you want to." That evening I left a message for Keller, 4 tight sentences that made my throat scratch because even now, stating what I needed felt like a transgression, and then I walked down to the front desk. Mr. Gomez, the doorman, had watched me lug a mattress up 4 flights the night I moved in because I was too proud to ask for help. He looked up from his crossword when I approached. "She caused trouble?" he asked, as if the building itself had ears that had been ringing all day. "She might come back with a locksmith," I said. "If that happens, please don't let anyone in without me. And if she tries to get upstairs, would you call the police?" He nodded solemnly. "No one comes upstairs without an owner or a permit. Condo rules." He tapped a faded page of bylaws pinned to the corkboard behind him without looking. "And we have cameras." He gestured to the little black domes in the ceiling corners. "For your peace." My peace. The phrase lodged somewhere I didn't know how to reach. When I returned, a note was taped to my door in handwriting that yanked me backward in time. Rounded loops, the heart instead of it, over the I, the same letters I used to envy when we were kids filling out Christmas tags. It read, "We're family. Stop humiliating me. I'll be back with someone who knows the law. Don't make this worse." I peeled it off and stuck it on a page in a notebook. At the top I wrote July 18th, incidents. Underneath, in small, neat script, I listed the times, the words she used, the officers' names and badge numbers. It didn't feel like tattling. It felt like placing bricks where a wall should have been. Keller called me the next morning. His voice had the dry warmth of someone who's seen every flavor of human mess and never stopped believing in order. "You did the right thing not to engage," he said after I told him everything. "Here's what we'll do. I'll draft a cease and desist letter regarding harassment and trespass. We'll inform the condo board formally so they're on notice. And we'll prepare for the possibility she tries something anyway. If she does, you call the police immediately. Do not open the door. Do not argue through it. Let your documentation talk." "What about her claim?" I asked. I didn't want to say family property again because it tasted like rust. "She's going to tell everyone Mom and Dad helped me with the down payment. She'll say it was meant for both of us." "Did they?" Keller asked gently, not like an accusation. "They gave me a small gift when I got promoted," I said. $5,000. I saved for years for the rest. I have the wire records." "Good," he said. "A gift isn't an ownership stake. Even if her story were true, there would need to be written evidence, co-ownership documents, a deed, a recorded lien. She has none of that. She cannot force her way in by yelling family." He paused. "But people like your sister don't fight in court first. They fight in the hallway." I thanked him and hung up and stood for a long while in the quiet. The hallway. That's where most of our lives had happened, really. Not in judges' chambers or on official paper, but in the narrow space where love meets entitlement and both insist they're the same thing. The next 2 days were a drip of agitation. Rachel worked the family phones the way a magician works a crowd, palms flashing, eyes bright, distracting. Aunt Linda left me a voicemail threaded with sighs. A cousin I hadn't seen since high school wrote a paragraph-long text about sisterhood and forgiveness that used the word blessed 3 times. I didn't answer any of them. Every time the silence stretched, my guilt tried to fill it with apology, but I kept it empty and let the echo teach me a new sound. On the 3rd night it happened. The building was half asleep. You can tell by the way the elevator hum softens and the pipes stop chattering like they're out of stories. I was in bed, a book open on my chest, when the buzzer thrummed through the intercom. I froze, then slid my feet to the floor. The clock glowed 2:11 a.m. I pressed the talk button and said nothing. A man's voice first, brisk, professional, locksmith. Then Rachel's, pitched between triumph and whisper. "We'll make this quick. She won't even know." My skin went cold. I pictured Mr. Gomez at his desk, his crossword abandoned, the lobby lights turning everything a tired gold. I pictured the cameras watching the front door blink as the locksmith presented his bag like a passport. I pressed the speak button. My voice came out a calm I didn't recognize. "This is the unit owner. No one is authorized to enter my apartment. If you attempt to access my door, I will call the police and you'll be trespassing." There was a pause. The locksmith cleared his throat. "Ma'am, I don't open doors without the owner present." "Sorry, miss." The intercom clicked like a small door closing. Rachel's voice slashed up from the lobby, thin with fury. "Caroline, you cannot do this to me." I picked up my phone and dialed 911. I used words I had copied from Keller's email, words that felt like putting on armor that actually fit. Attempted unlawful entry, ongoing harassment, documentation available. By the time the officers arrived, Mr. Gomez had already walked them to the elevator. I met them at the door, my camera recording through the peephole, my notebook open on the console table like a ledger. They escorted Rachel outside while the locksmith apologized to the air and hurried off into the rain. One officer returned upstairs to tell me she'd been warned formally that any further attempt to gain access would result in charges. He asked if I wanted to file a report. I said yes, and my voice didn't tremble. When the hallway quieted and the elevator returned to its baseline hum, I lowered to the floor inside my door and pressed my back to it. I could feel the grain of the wood through my pajama shirt, the last of my adrenaline leaking out of me like air from a puncture. A soft sound made me lean forward, paper sliding under the door. I watched as a manila envelope edged into the foyer like a trapped animal. It stopped against the toe of my slipper. I stared at it and did not touch it. On the front, my name in Rachel's careful loops. I waited a full minute before I picked it up and carried it to the table. Inside, photocopies. Bank statements from the year before Mom died. The joints in my fingers went numb. Rachel had underlined several entries in green marker, and next to them, arrows, and next to the arrows, words. Transfer Caroline's account. My throat tightened as if the room had suddenly lost air. The amounts were small by the standards of people on TV and still huge to us, to the woman who crocheted Afghans for cash at the end. I knew those transfers. I had initiated them. Mom's signed consent, the reimbursement for medical supplies I'd purchased on my credit card when her hands couldn't manage a pen, and Dad was already gone, and the hospice nurse had explained the forms twice. The receipts were in a folder in my closet with Mom's handwriting on the tabs. I had been the one to make the lists, to scan the invoices, to make sure the numbers matched because I believed that being honest could save you. Rachel's note, clipped to the top with a butterfly paperclip, was one sentence. Going to the bank Monday. Let's see what they say about your ownership. I sat very still, listening to the pipes creak, to the sound of something far away slamming like a car door at the end of a dream. It wasn't just that she would lie about me. It was that she would take a moment from the worst year of our lives, turn its grime to glitter, hold it up to a crowd, and call it theft. I reached for my notebook and wrote the time and what she had left and what I would do next. Email Keller, pull receipts, copy Mom's consent forms, notify the board that any third-party inquiries about my unit must go through counsel. I wrote like I was laying track in front of a train. Then I closed my eyes and saw a grainy home video I haven't watched in 20 years. Two girls on a sun-bleached porch, one small enough to still trip on her own feet, the other clutching a new jump rope. Let her try. A voice off-screen says, tired and kind. The older girl hesitates, then hands it over. The younger girl tangles herself in it immediately, falls, cries, is rescued. The older girl sits back down on the steps, empty-handed, the rope lying like a question mark in the dust. I am not a child anymore. I am not a porch. At 4 a.m, as the building finally fell into the quiet that belongs to the hour before dawn, my phone buzzed one last time. A text from an unknown number with a single sentence. You think you can shut me out? You have no idea what I know. I stared at it until the words blurred, and then sharpened again. It wasn't just a threat. It was a promise that we were not done, that the old story had found a new prop and a bigger audience. For the first time, I felt something besides fear and anger, something like clarity. If she wanted a stage, I would build a courtroom. If she wanted family property, I would show her what property meant. And if she wanted to rewrite our lives, I would show her the receipts. I turned off the lamp and lay in the dark, my hands flat on the sheet, feeling the thrum of my pulse slow back to something that could sustain a person. The apartment around me felt different, not smaller, not embattled, but attentive, like a friend who had finally been trusted with the truth. Outside, the rain lifted. Somewhere in the city, a truck downshifted and kept going. Morning would come.
So would Monday.
So would the bank. I closed my eyes and did something I hadn't done since Mom died. I pictured a future scene and let it steady me. A table, sunlight on paper, a man in a suit sliding a document toward me with a nod, words like judgment entered and claim dismissed, my hands no longer shaking when I signed. I pictured Rachel seeing, not me, not my face, but a line she couldn't cross, and stopping for the first time in her life because the story didn't bend anymore where she pushed. I slept for 3 hours and woke to a city that smelled like wet pavement and coffee. I made both. Then I opened my closet and pulled out the blue accordion folder labeled with Mom's handwriting. I carried it to the table and began to lay the pages out in neat piles, the way you lay out puzzle pieces before you find the edges. The paper felt thin and strong under my fingers. Somewhere between the first receipt and the third, between the hospice invoice and the pharmacy summary, I realized what waiting really meant. Not passivity, not fear, not enduring her storm until it blew over on its own whim. Waiting meant preparing. Waiting meant choosing the moment you open the door. And for once in my life, I would be the one to decide when that moment arrived. Monday arrived with the kind of thin light that makes the city look washed out, like someone left it in the rain too long. I dressed carefully, nothing fancy, just a pressed blouse and black slacks, clothes that made me feel anchored. In my bag, I packed the accordion folder with Mom's handwriting, a fresh notebook, and a thermos of coffee. My hands shook only once while buttoning my blouse, but I pressed them flat against the fabric until the tremor passed. I wasn't heading into battle yet, not really, but it felt like reconnaissance. Keller had told me to be ready for Rachel to stir things up at the bank, and I wasn't going to let her walk into a place where my mortgage was processed and soil my name with her version of events, without counterweight. The lobby of the bank was the same as always. Marble floors, potted plants that were somehow both too green and not real enough, the air chilled into sterility. I checked in with the receptionist, who smiled with polite disinterest, and took a seat in one of those stiff lobby chairs designed to keep you from lingering. My reflection blinked back at me from the polished floor, hair pulled neatly into a bun, lips pressed into a line, eyes darker than usual from too little sleep. Rachel arrived exactly 10 minutes later, as if she'd planned the entrance for maximum sting. She swept in with her hair loose and glossy, wearing one of her bold wrap dresses that always seemed to shout confidence even when her life was a mess. She caught sight of me and faltered for just half a second before her mouth curled into that practiced smirk. "Well," she said, approaching with the kind of sway that suggested she was about to deliver a performance. "Didn't think you'd actually show." "I live here too," I replied evenly, and her eyes narrowed at the words. She leaned closer, her voice dropping. "Not for long." Before I could respond, a bank officer appeared, holding a clipboard and wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "Miss Parker?" "Miss Parker?" he said, looking between us in confusion. We both stood. "I'm Caroline," I said. "I'm Rachel," she countered. His eyebrows twitched.
Ah.
"Well, please follow me. We'll sort this out." Inside the glass-walled office, Rachel launched into her story before the officer could even sit. This apartment was purchased with family funds. Our parents intended for it to be shared. My sister has been excluding me unfairly, and that's not true. I cut in, sliding the folder onto the desk with a snap. I worked and saved for years. This apartment is mine. These are the receipts from the down payment, the mortgage documents, the title deed. There is no joint ownership, no lien, no shared claim. The officer looked overwhelmed, shuffling papers like a man caught between two storms. Rachel leaned back, folding her arms. "She's lying. Look at the bank transfers. Look at the amounts. They came from our mother's account." I pulled out the hospice receipts, each one carefully labeled. Yes, they did. And here is the documentation. Every dollar was reimbursement for medical costs, supplies, medications, doctor visits. I kept records because I knew someday she would try this. My voice trembled with something that was not fear anymore, but steel being tempered in flame. The officer nodded slowly as he flipped through the folder. "From what I see here, all the funds were properly accounted for. The property is listed solely under Caroline Parker's name. I'm sorry, Miss Rachel, but unless you have official documentation..." Rachel's face twisted. "This isn't about paperwork. It's about family." The officer's voice sharpened. "At the bank, it's always about paperwork." She shot me a look that could have carved me open. For a moment, I saw the little girl again. The one who cried when her Barbies had popped off. The one who begged me to trade my dessert for hers. But then I saw the woman she had become. The one who would take our mother's last year of life and twist it into ammunition against me. She stood abruptly, chair scraping. "This isn't over," she hissed, loud enough for the whole lobby to hear as she stalked out. The officer sighed, sliding my documents back across the desk. I'd advise you to keep all of these close. It seems your sister is determined. I've kept them close for years, I said softly. Walking out of that bank felt both like a victory and a wound. Victory, because I had stood my ground. Wound, because it had come to this. Our private grief splayed out under fluorescent lights, our bond shredded in front of strangers. Back at my apartment, I found another note shoved under the door. This one wasn't handwritten. It was typed, stark black on white, the letters jagged as if hammered into place. You can't hide behind paperwork forever. Blood matters more than ink. I sat on the floor with the note in my lap, the silence of the apartment pressing down on me. She was escalating. It wasn't just about the apartment anymore, it was about power, about her refusal to ever be on the outside of anything. That night, Leah came over with takeout and a bottle of wine. She kicked off her shoes, dropped onto the couch, and studied me like a detective. You look like you're about to storm a castle, she said. Maybe I am, I admitted, sliding the note across the coffee table. She read it and shook her head. She's not going to stop. You know that, right? I nodded. But neither am I. We ate in silence for a while, the clink of chopsticks against plastic containers the only sound. Finally, Leah said, "Have you thought about revenge?" I looked at her sharply. This isn't about revenge. It's about survival. Sometimes survival looks a lot like revenge, she said simply. Sometimes standing your ground is the sweetest payback. Her words lingered long after she left. The following week was a test of nerves. Rachel didn't show up in person again, but the calls from relatives kept flooding in, each one more pointed than the last. Aunt Linda left another voicemail about family unity. A cousin sent me a Bible verse about generosity. A neighbor downstairs even stopped me in the lobby to say Rachel had told her I was kicking out my own blood. It was like a smear campaign, only this time the battlefield wasn't just a hallway or a bank, it was my entire circle, small as it was. She wanted me isolated, cornered, ashamed. But instead of shrinking, I found myself documenting harder. Every voicemail, every text, every note slid under my door, went into the folder. Keller encouraged it. Paper trails win wars, he said. She's building a narrative. You're building evidence. Keep going. Then came the letter. Not Rachel's, but from her lawyer. A thin envelope, crisp and impersonal, stating that Rachel Parker intended to pursue her equitable interest in my property and would seek legal remedies if I didn't allow her access. I held the letter in my hands, the words swimming. Equitable interest. Legal remedies. My chest tightened, but instead of folding, I marched down to the board's office and handed them a copy. This is harassment, I told them. And I'm not going to let her turn my home into a courtroom. The board president, a sharp woman named Mrs. Green with hair like iron filings, scanned the letter and frowned.
We'll note this.
If she tries to enter without your permission, security will treat it as trespass. You're the legal owner. That's all that matters to us. Her certainty was a bomb. For the first time in weeks, I slept without dreaming of locks breaking. But the calm didn't last. 2 days later, as I was unlocking my door after work, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The little camera dome in the hallway ceiling had been tilted. Not much, just a fraction, but enough to no longer capture my door directly. Someone had tampered with it. I went to Mr. Gomez immediately. His face tightened when I told him. I'll check the feed, he promised. If someone touched it, we'll see. That night, I lay awake listening for sounds in the hallway, every creak magnified into a threat. The note's words echoed in my mind. Blood matters more than ink. When the phone rang at 3 a.m., I almost didn't answer. But the caller ID said private number, and something in my gut told me it was her. I picked up, and sure enough, Rachel's voice slithered through the line. Enjoy your victory, Caroline. You think paperwork and locks will save you? You have no idea what's coming. Her words were calm, measured, scarier than her screams. Then she hung up. I sat in the dark, the receiver pressed to my ear, realizing that this wasn't just about the apartment anymore. It was about the way Rachel had always lived, taking, twisting, claiming. Only this time, I wasn't giving. And she couldn't stand it. The war wasn't coming. It had already begun. And for once, I wasn't just defending myself. I was preparing to win. The morning after that late-night call, I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. My hair was still neatly tied, my blouse still pressed, but something had changed in my eyes. The fear was still there, yes, but beneath it was something harder, something sharper. It reminded me of the way Mom used to look at weeds in her garden, tired of pulling them, but determined to dig out the roots once and for all. Rachel wasn't going to stop. I knew that now as surely as I knew my own name. She had tasted the smallest hint of power, just enough to believe she could rewrite reality, and she would keep pressing until she either broke me or forced me out. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't just bracing for her storm. I was preparing mine. The first step was the camera. Mr. Gomez called me mid-morning to say he had reviewed the security feed. Someone, face obscured by a hood, had indeed reached up and adjusted the hallway camera. The timestamp, 2:47 a.m. 2 nights ago. The figure was slim, their movements nervous, furtive. Gomez couldn't swear it was Rachel, but he didn't need to. I knew that gait. I had watched it since childhood, her impatient shuffle, her weight always on one foot like she was ready to dart away. "I'll file a report with the condo board," he said. "But if it happens again, you should escalate. Cameras are for your protection. Tampering with them is no small thing." "Thank you," I murmured, though my throat was tight. I hung up and sat in silence, the city's hum filtering through the window. I pictured Rachel in the hallway, reaching up on tiptoe, turning that camera away from my door like a magician redirecting the audience's gaze. What did she plan to do once the eye wasn't watching? That afternoon I met with Keller in his office, a tidy space lined with law books and the faint smell of old paper. He listened as I described the tampering, the phone call, the typed note. His brow furrowed deeper with each detail. "She's escalating," he said finally. "Good news is you're documenting everything. Bad news is she may test boundaries until there are consequences she can't ignore."
He tapped a pen against his desk.
"We'll strengthen your position. I'll file a harassment complaint formally this week. That way, if she so much as sets foot in the building again, you'll have the leverage to involve law enforcement beyond a simple warning." "Will that stop her?" I asked. "Maybe not, but it will make her missteps costlier." He leaned back, folding his hands. "Caroline, you need to accept something. She's not fighting for fairness. She's fighting because she can't stand losing. And she'll scorch the earth before she admits defeat." His words landed like stones in my stomach, heavy but grounding. For so long, I tried to make sense of Rachel's actions by measuring them against reason. Now I saw them for what they were. Not reason, not fairness, just hunger. That night, I decided to give her exactly what she'd asked for. I would let her step into the light she thought she wanted. Only this time, I would control the spotlight. I started with the family. For weeks I had been silent, letting Rachel's calls and texts poison the air. Now I drafted an email, calm, measured, packed with attachments. Scans of the deed, copies of Mom's reimbursement notes, photos of the receipts, even the letter from Rachel's lawyer. I wrote, "Dear family, I know you've heard many things from Rachel. I want to set the record straight, not with emotions but with facts. Attached are the documents proving sole ownership of my apartment, as well as proof that any money from Mom was reimbursement for her medical expenses, not a down payment. Rachel has been harassing me and attempting to gain unlawful entry. I have legal counsel involved and I am documenting everything. I love my family, but I will not tolerate lies or intimidation. Please do not involve yourselves further unless you are prepared to do so with honesty and evidence." I hit send and sat back, my heart racing. Within an hour, replies trickled in, some stunned silence, some half-hearted apologies, some embarrassed admissions that they hadn't known the full story. Aunt Linda, predictably, wrote back, "This isn't how family handles things. You're tearing us apart." For once, I didn't reply. Let silence be my answer. The next day, Rachel showed up again. Not at my door this time, but downstairs in the lobby. Mr. Gomez called up to warn me. She's insisting she has a right to come up, he said. Do you want me to call the police? Yes, I said without hesitation. By the time I glanced out the lobby window from above, 2 officers were already speaking with her. Her hands waved wildly, her voice rising so high it carried even to the 4th floor. She pointed upward once, twice, like I was some tyrant barricaded in a castle tower. Then, as if she felt my eyes, her head snapped up and our gazes locked. There was no pleading in her face anymore, only fury. The officers finally escorted her out, her words echoing in fragments. Not over legal right, family property. I closed the blinds and leaned against the wall, my pulse pounding. And yet, beneath the adrenaline, there was relief too. She had shown her hand in public now. Each outburst was another nail in her coffin, and I was collecting them one by one. That evening Keller called to say the harassment complaint had been filed. The more she shows up, the stronger your case. Keep recording, keep documenting. At this point, she's building it for you. For the first time in weeks, I laughed. Not a full laugh, more a short, bitter bark, but it felt good. But Rachel wasn't done. 2 nights later, as I was coming home from work, I noticed a flyer taped to the entrance of my building. Bold letters screamed, "Beware of a thief in your building." Underneath, a photo of me, cropped from some family gathering years ago, grainy but unmistakable. Below it, words, "This woman stole from her dying mother to buy her apartment. Ask her about the money. Ask her about the fraud." My knees nearly buckled. Residents were passing by, some pausing, some whispering. My face burned as I ripped the flyer down, my hands shaking. Inside the lobby, Mr. Gomez had already gathered several more from the walls. His jaw was set like stone. "She put them up," he said flatly. "We have her on camera this time. Every floor, every hallway. She was here for over an hour." I clutched the flyers, the paper crumpling in my fists. Humiliation washed over me in waves, hot and suffocating. But beneath it, something else rose, rage. Pure, clean, steady. "She wants war," I whispered.
Fine.
"She'll have war." That night, I spread the flyers out on my table, snapped photos, and sent them to Keller. I titled the email, "Defamation." His reply came within the hour. "Perfect evidence. We'll add it to the case. She's handing us everything we need." But as I looked at the ugly words printed beneath my face, I realized something. Legal victory wasn't enough anymore. Rachel wasn't just trying to take my apartment. She was trying to erase me, to reduce my entire life to her version of events. And that I could not forgive. So I made a decision. I wouldn't just defend myself. I would make sure Rachel finally faced the consequences she had dodged all her life. The next morning, I began digging. Old photos, old stories, fragments of the past she had hoped no one remembered. Times she'd stolen from our parents, lied to friends, scammed landlords. I still had the text from the year she borrowed my credit card and left me with a $900 bill at a boutique. I still had the email from our cousin about the borrowed car she never returned on time. Individually, they were small. Together, they were a pattern. I compiled everything into a growing file labeled, "Rachel, Evidence." And as I worked, a strange calm settled over me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the older sister covering for her mistakes. I wasn't the peacemaker smoothing over her damage. I wasn't the victim of her entitlement. I was the one keeping receipts. And soon, Rachel would learn what it felt like when the story didn't bend her way. The file on my desk grew heavier each night. It wasn't just paper anymore. It was years of my life finally gathered in one place, proof that the chaos Rachel carried with her had always left scars. Credit card statements, old texts, landlord complaints, even a few photos from years back when she'd borrowed Mom's car and dented the bumper without ever admitting it. For so long I had held onto these things with a mixture of shame and exhaustion, afraid of looking petty if I pointed to the trail she left behind. But now I saw it differently. This wasn't pettiness. It was a record. It was the truth she'd been rewriting for decades, finally pinned to paper where it couldn't be twisted by her voice. Keller looked over the growing file one evening when I brought it to his office. His eyebrows lifted slightly, impressed. "You've done more work than half my paralegals," he said, flipping through a stack of old emails. "This paints a very clear picture." "Will it be enough?" I asked, my fingers tightening on the edge of my bag. "For court? Yes. But for your peace of mind?" He shook his head. "That's another matter entirely. Only you can decide when you've done enough to be free of her." His words rattled around in my mind for days. Because the truth was, I didn't just want her stopped legally. I wanted her seen. I wanted everyone who had believed her, every cousin, every neighbor, every officer who had patiently listened to her lies in the hallway, to see her for what she really was. That's when the idea came to me. Rachel lived for other people's opinions. She always had. As kids, she'd fake tears in the grocery store aisle to get strangers to glare at me. As an adult, she used family whispers like a weapon, twisting stories until I was always the selfish one, the liar, the cold older sister. She thrived on narratives. So, I decided to give her one she couldn't escape. I began small. I knew she was still feeding the family her side of things, painting herself as the poor victim locked out of her rightful home. So I quietly sent Keller's formal harassment complaint to every relative who had texted me in the last month. No commentary, no pleading, just the official document stamped and signed. The subject line read simply, "For your information." Within hours, replies came back. My cousin Amanda wrote, "Wow. Didn't realize it was this serious." Uncle Dave, usually silent, replied, "Rachel's always been dramatic. Should have known." Even Aunt Linda went quiet for the first time in weeks. The silence was sweeter than any apology. But that was only the first step. One Friday evening, I sat at my laptop scrolling through my building's online community forum. It was usually a dull place, residents complaining about recycling bins or asking if anyone had a spare drill, but tonight I drafted a post under my real name. "Dear neighbors, recently, some of you may have seen flyers posted in our building accusing me of theft and fraud. These were placed by my sister, who has been attempting to illegally gain access to my apartment. For your clarity, I am the sole legal owner of Unit 4B. Attached are documents proving ownership. I have filed a harassment complaint, and security has been instructed not to allow her entry. I apologize if anyone felt misled by the false statements. Please know the matter is being handled through the proper channels." I hit post and sat back. Within an hour, replies stacked up. "We figured it was nonsense. Hang in there. Saw her hanging around the lobby at night. Thought it was odd. Glad security is on it. Thanks for clarifying. Don't let her bully you." The building had seen her tantrums, her midnight appearances, her wild accusations. They didn't need much convincing. All I had to do was show them the receipts. Rachel must have seen the post, because 2 nights later she showed up again, this time outside on the sidewalk, shouting up at my window like some Shakespearean villain. Her voice carried through the glass. "Caroline, you can't hide forever. Everyone knows you're a thief." But this time, instead of cowering, I pulled out my phone and recorded. The glare of the streetlight lit her face, twisted with rage, her hair whipping in the wind as she hurled accusations to a row of indifferent windows. A neighbor walking his dog stopped and stared. Someone else leaned out their balcony, with a phone too. By the time the police arrived, Rachel had worked herself into such a frenzy that they didn't just issue another warning, they cited her for disturbing the peace. Watching her argue with the officers, her voice shrill and desperate, I felt a grim satisfaction. For once, her theatrics weren't charming anyone. They were being written down in an incident report. And still, she didn't stop. The following week, I received an email from my HR department at work. The subject line made my stomach clench, "Anonymous concern regarding employee conduct." The email claimed I had stolen money from my dying mother, that I had lied to obtain my mortgage, that I was under investigation. It was clearly Rachel, her voice in every line, but the damage was real. HR had to investigate, and for 3 days I lived in a fog of fear that I'd lose not just my apartment, but the career I'd built. Thankfully, when I provided them with the same documentation I'd been amassing, deeds, receipts, the harassment complaint, they quickly closed the matter. My manager called me privately afterward. I'm sorry you're dealing with this, he said, his voice gentle. But if it happens again, we'll back you up. When I hung up, relief washed through me, followed by something hotter. Rachel had tried to take my home. Now she was trying to take my livelihood. Enough was enough. That night, I called Keller and said the words I'd been holding back for weeks. I don't just want to defend myself anymore. I want to press charges. I want her held accountable. There was a pause on the line. Then his steady voice. Good. Then let's build the case to end this once and for all. The next days blurred into a rhythm of preparation. I met with Keller twice, each time bringing new evidence, screen recordings of Rachel's voicemails, screenshots of her messages, the video of her screaming on the sidewalk. He laid it out like a mosaic, a picture that became clearer with every piece. Harassment, defamation, attempted unlawful entry, even workplace interference. She's handed us a case that could bury her, Keller said one afternoon, tapping the stack of documents. Not just civil court. Criminal harassment. Maybe even stalking, depending on the judge. The words made me shiver, but not from fear. From justice. But even as the case solidified, I knew Rachel wouldn't go quietly. She had built her entire life on the belief that she could always talk her way out, always twist the story until she was the wronged party. She wouldn't accept the truth until it was forced into the light where she couldn't cover it. And that's when I decided to set a trap. I invited her to meet me at a cafe downtown. I chose a corner table, tucked a small recorder in my bag, and waited. She arrived 20 minutes late, sweeping in like she owned the place, her dress loud, her perfume louder. Well, she said, sliding into the seat opposite me. Ready to admit you can't win? I looked her straight in the eye. Rachel, you need to stop this. You're harassing me. You're lying to the family, to my neighbors, to my employer. It has to end. She smirked, leaning in. Or what? You'll sue me? Please. No one's going to side with you. You think paperwork makes you strong? I've got the family, I've got the stories. All I have to do is keep pushing until you break. My heart pounded, but I kept my voice steady. So, you admit you're lying? She laughed, tossing her hair. Lying? It's not lying if people believe it. And they will. They always do. I didn't flinch. I let her words hang in the air, every syllable captured by the recorder, humming quietly in my bag. When I finally stood to leave, she looked startled. That's it? You're running away again? No, I said, pulling my coat around my shoulders. I'm just done playing your game. As I walked out, my pulse hammering, I realized something. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of Rachel anymore. I wasn't even angry. I was ready. Because soon, she would learn that stories don't win in court. Evidence does. And I had all of it. The recording played back with a clarity that made my skin prickle. Rachel's voice, smooth, mocking, triumphant, spilled from Keller's office speakers like poison dripping into a glass. It's not lying if people believe it. And they will. They always do. I sat across from Keller, my hands clasped so tightly in my lap that my knuckles had gone pale. He leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. Well, he said, clicking the recorder off. That's about as close to a confession as you could ask for. The words should have made me feel vindicated, but in that moment I felt hollow, almost shaky. Hearing Rachel so calmly, so proudly twist reality in her own voice, it was like watching a stranger wear my sister's face. Keller's tone sharpened. We'll present this as part of the harassment case. Combined with the flyers, the workplace interference, the attempted entries, this is airtight. A judge won't look kindly on her antics. He tapped the folder thick with evidence. You're not just defending yourself anymore, Caroline. You're setting her up for consequences she won't be able to wriggle out of. Consequences. The word curled through me like heat. When I left Keller's office that day, the city felt different. The buildings taller, the sky wider. For weeks, I had felt cornered in my own life, waiting for Rachel's next strike. Now, for the first time, I felt like I was the one holding the match. Rachel must have sensed it too, because her attacks grew louder, more desperate. She sent me emails filled with insults, each one more unhinged than the last. She left voicemails that swung between rage and tearful pleading. One night, she even showed up outside the condo again, screaming that she'd been betrayed, that I was stealing from blood. But by then, the neighbors weren't whispering in sympathy. They were rolling their eyes, filming her with their phones, shaking their heads as the police carted her off once more. The tide had turned. Still, the final battle was yet to come. Keller filed the formal harassment suit on my behalf, and Rachel, of course, contested it. She hired a lawyer of her own, a slick-talking man with expensive suits and a grin that reminded me of oil on water. He parroted her claims about family property and shared funds, but when pressed for evidence, he came up short every time. The hearing was scheduled for early October. I marked the date on my calendar in thick black ink, the kind that bled through the page. It felt like an execution date, not for me, but for the hold she'd had over me all my life. The weeks leading up to it were a blur of preparation. Keller drilled me on how to answer questions calmly, how to let the evidence speak louder than my anger. She'll try to provoke you, he warned. She wants you to look emotional, unstable.
Don't give her that gift.
I practiced in the mirror, repeating phrases until they felt like armor. Yes, that is correct. No, she has no documentation. Yes, this is the deed. I stripped my answers of the emotion that wanted to leak through, leaving only precision. And then, finally, the day arrived. The courthouse was colder than I expected, all marble and echoing footsteps, the kind of place that makes you feel small no matter who you are. Rachel was already there when I walked in, dressed in a sharp blazer and heels, her hair pulled into a sleek bun. She looked every inch the wronged sister, composed, serious, almost regal. But when her eyes met mine, I saw the cracks. A flicker of panic, quickly smoothed over. The judge was an older woman with stern eyes and a voice that brooked no nonsense. She listened as Rachel's lawyer laid out their claim, all honeyed words about family bonds and shared understanding. Rachel nodded along, her face carefully arranged into sorrow. Then it was my turn. Keller spoke first, laying out the evidence piece by piece. The deed, the mortgage, the receipts from Mom's hospice care, the harassment complaint. Each document landed like a stone on the table, building a wall she couldn't climb. And then finally the recording. The moment Rachel's voice filled the courtroom, I watched her composure crack. It's not lying if people believe it. Her lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Rachel's eyes darted toward me, wide now, panicked. The judge's expression hardened. Is that your voice, Miss Parker? Rachel stammered, her words tangling in the air. I was taken out of context. That's not, she tricked me. But the damage was done. The judge leaned forward, her tone icy. Miss Parker, what I hear on this recording is not a misunderstanding. It is a clear admission of intent to deceive. Combined with the evidence presented, it paints a very troubling picture. Rachel's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. For once, she had no story left to tell. When the judge finally ruled, her words felt like a gavel to my heart. The court finds in favor of Caroline Parker. The harassment is substantiated. Rachel Parker is hereby ordered to cease all contact, direct or indirect, with her sister. Any further attempts to claim ownership of the property will be considered frivolous and subject to sanctions. The gavel came down, and just like that, it was over. Or, at least, the legal part was. As I walked out of that courthouse, documents clutched in my hand, I felt lighter than I had in years. The building seemed to breathe with me, the sky outside bluer, the air sharper. Rachel followed behind, her heels clicking angrily, her face twisted into something between rage and disbelief. You think this means you won? She hissed as we stepped into the street. This isn't over, Caroline. It's never over. I turned to her, calm as stone. No, Rachel. It's over. You just don't know it yet. And for the first time in my life, I didn't flinch when she glared. I didn't apologize. I didn't shrink. I walked away, and she was the one left standing alone. But even as I celebrated that victory, I knew my revenge wasn't complete. Rachel had spent months dragging my name through the mud, turning family against me, humiliating me in front of neighbors and coworkers. Winning in court was justice. But revenge? That required something more. So, I began planning the final act. The court's ruling should have been enough. For most people, it would have been. I had the law on my side, a restraining order in place, and the thick wall of documented truth between me and Rachel's lies. But as I sat in my apartment in the days after, surrounded by the silence I'd fought so hard to protect, I realized something. Justice wasn't the same as closure. Rachel hadn't just tried to take my apartment. She had tried to erase me, my work, my sacrifices, even my reputation. And I knew her. She'd never accept defeat quietly. She would carry her version of the story like a torch, whispering it to anyone who would listen, rewriting herself as the victim of my cruelty. And that I couldn't allow. So I decided, if Rachel lived on stories, I would make sure this one ended in a way she could never spin. It started with the family. I organized everything, every piece of evidence, every flyer, every note, even the recording of her laughing about lying, and I built a timeline. Not just for the lawsuit, but for the years before it. The credit card theft, the landlord complaints, the car she dented and never paid for. Piece by piece, I stitched together the truth of Rachel's life. Then, with the same calm I'd practiced in front of the mirror, I invited the family to a dinner. Not at my apartment. I wanted neutral ground, so I booked a private room at a modest Italian restaurant. Just family, I wrote in the invitation. No arguments, just clarity. They came, hesitant and curious. Aunt Linda sat stiffly at the end of the table, her lips pressed thin. My cousins whispered among themselves. And then Rachel arrived, late as always, her entrance dramatic. Black dress, bold lipstick, like she was walking into a play where she was the tragic heroine. "What's this about?" she demanded, dropping into a chair. I stood, a folder in my hands. My heart pounded, but my voice came out steady. "This is about the truth. And I'm going to show it to you, once and for all." I laid the papers out on the table. Deed, mortgage, receipts, flyers, transcripts of voicemails, screenshots of texts, the harassment complaint, the police reports, the workplace interference email, and finally, the recording. I hit play, and Rachel's voice filled the room. It's not lying if people believe it. And they will. They always do. The words hung in the air like smoke. For the first time in my life, Rachel didn't have an audience to charm. The family's faces shifted, shock, disappointment, anger. Aunt Linda's cheeks flushed crimson. My cousin Amanda whispered, "Oh my God." Rachel sputtered, her hands flying up. "This is taken out of context. She's twisting everything." "No," I said, my voice cutting clean through her excuses. "You've twisted everything your whole life. Not anymore. This is the truth. This is who you are." Silence followed, heavy and final. Rachel's mouth opened, then closed. For once, she had no words. I gathered the papers back into the folder and looked around the table. "You don't have to believe me.
You don't even have to like me.
But you will not call me a liar again. And you will not call my home family property." Then I walked out, leaving the weight of her own words crushing down on her. The fallout was immediate. Cousins stopped answering her calls. Aunt Linda, her most loyal defender, sent me a quiet email the next day. "I'm sorry. I didn't know." Even Uncle Dave, who rarely spoke up, told me Rachel had tried calling him in tears. "She's burned too many bridges," he said simply. Rachel's power had always come from whisper networks, from turning people against me one by one. Now, those whispers had dried up. She was isolated, her lies laid bare. But the final stroke of revenge came from somewhere I hadn't expected. A week later, the building held its annual condo board meeting. Normally, I dreaded these endless debates about recycling bins and parking spaces, but this time, I showed up early. And there, pinned to the community corkboard, was a printed notice from the board. Due to repeated incidents of harassment, defamation, and attempted unlawful entry, Rachel Parker is permanently barred from the premises of this building. Security and residents have been notified. Any attempt to trespass will result in immediate police action. The word stopped me in my tracks. It wasn't just legal victory. It was public acknowledgement. My neighbors, the very people Rachel had tried to turn against me with her flyers and sidewalk performances, now knew the truth. She was the problem, not me. As the meeting began, Mrs. Green, the board president, even nodded at me. "We appreciate your patience through all this, Caroline," she said. "You handled yourself with dignity."
Dignity.
That was a word I hadn't associated with myself in months. For so long, I'd felt humiliated, cornered, ashamed. And now, in front of the very community Rachel had tried to poison against me, I stood vindicated. That night, back in my apartment, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat by the window. The city stretched out below, lights flickering like stars fallen to earth. For the first time in years, I felt at peace in my own space. Not just safe, but whole. I knew Rachel would keep raging somewhere, spinning her stories to anyone who'd still listen. But it no longer mattered. She had been exposed, her lies dragged into the light, her power broken. My revenge wasn't loud or violent. It wasn't dramatic. It was simply this. Rachel had built her life on the belief that she could always twist the story, always make me the villain. And now she couldn't. Not with the law, not with the family, not with my neighbors. The story was mine again.
And I intended to keep it that way.
I finished my wine, locked the door, and smiled at the sound of the bolt sliding into place. For the first time since Rachel had tried to call my home family property, the lock didn't just keep her out. It kept my peace in.